He did not throw a sign. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time near the wrong people. This video is about the people who made the mistake deliberately and paid the same price. Every year in cities across America, people die because of a hand gesture, a wrong finger position, a sign they saw in a music video, a peace sign thrown at the exact wrong angle in the exact wrong neighborhood in front of the exact wrong person. These signs are not performances. They are not fashion. They are not something a rapper invented to look interesting in a video. They are declarations, a language developed specifically to communicate identity, territory, challenge, and threat without a single word being spoken. Today we expose the 5 deadliest gang signs in America, what they actually mean, what happens when the wrong person throws them, and the real documented cases of people who made that mistake without understanding what they were saying. Because in the world these signs come from, saying the wrong thing to the wrong person in the wrong place has consequences that no apology can reverse. The history of gang signs. Before we go into the specific signs, you need to understand something about why gang signs exist at all. Because most people who have seen them have never thought about the practical problem they were designed to solve. In the 1970s and 1980s, as gang activity rose dramatically in Los Angeles and Chicago, law enforcement agencies began developing serious capacity to monitor, record, and prosecute gang-related verbal communication. Conversations were recorded, informants were placed, coded language was deciphered and used in prosecutions that put senior gang members away for serious sentences. The gangs responded the way any organization responds when its primary communication channel becomes compromised. They found another one. Hand signs, called stacking in the gang world, allowed members to communicate identity, affiliation, challenge, and instruction in real time without producing anything that could be recorded and used in court. A hand sign lasted a second. It could be thrown across a street, across a yard, across a room full of people, and only the people who understood the language would know what was said. Within a decade, stacking had developed from a practical security measure into something much more significant. It became identity. The sign you threw told everyone who could read it exactly who you were, where you were from, which set you belonged to, and what your presence in a particular location meant. It became territory. Throwing a sign in a neighborhood communicated a claim about who that neighborhood belonged to. It became challenge. Throwing the wrong sign, or throwing the right sign in the wrong direction, or responding incorrectly when a sign was thrown at you, communicated something that required a response. And then something happened that the gangs who developed these signs never anticipated. Hip-hop took the signs global. Music videos broadcast them to audiences of millions who had no connection to the neighborhoods, the sets, or the conflicts that gave the signs their meaning. The internet made them permanently accessible to anyone with a phone, and a generation of young people around the world started throwing signs they had seen on screens, without understanding that the screens were showing them the surface of something that had depth, history, and consequences that the camera never captured. See, RIPS the C and its variations, the Crips, are one of the largest street gang networks in the United States with over 30,000 active members. According to FBI National Gang Threat Assessment data, they are also one of the most fragmented, which is the detail that makes their signs particularly dangerous to throw casually. Most people who know anything about Crip hand signs know the basic C formed with the thumb and forefinger. They have seen it in films. They have seen it in music videos. They think they understand what it means. They do not understand the detail that matters most. In Crip culture, the C is not universal. The Crips are not a single unified organization. They are a loose collection of sets, individual gangs that share the Crip name and certain traditions, but that have distinct identities, distinct territories, distinct rivalries, and in many cases distinct variations of the signs that identify membership. The Rollin 60s Crips, the Grape Street Crips, the 8 Tray Gangsters, the Hoover Criminals. Each of these sets has sign variations that identify membership specifically within that set. Throwing a Rollin 60s variation in 8 Tray territory is not a neutral act. It is a territorial claim made on behalf of a rival set. And the response to a territorial claim made in the wrong neighborhood is not a conversation. In 2017, Los Angeles law enforcement documented over 40 gang-related confrontations in a single year, where intra-crip sign misidentification was listed as a contributing factor. 40 confrontations between people who were both claiming Crip affiliation, between people who were theoretically on the same side. That escalated into violence because the specific variation of a hand sign communicated the wrong, set affiliation to the wrong audience. Now think about what that means for someone with no affiliation at all who throws a Crip sign because they saw it on a screen. They are not just making a mistake, they are making a claim. And in gang culture, claims are verified. The verification process is not a conversation. Bloods to be stacked, the Bloods and the Crips share a history that goes back to the early 1970s in Los Angeles, and they share something else. A relationship with hand signs that has developed over 50 years into one of the most complex and most dangerous nonverbal communication systems in American street culture. The Bloods use the B-stack and blood sign variations that differ by set in the same way that Crip signs differ by set. The Piru Bloods, the Brim Bloods, the Nine Trey Gangsters all have variations that communicate specific affiliation to anyone with the knowledge to read them. But here is what makes the Bloods particularly dangerous in terms of sinus use. And this comes directly from correctional officers and criminologists who have documented it in professional literature. Blood members, particularly those operating in prison environments, use gang signs as a direct identity test. When someone new enters a blood-controlled unit in a correctional facility, the established members watch. They watch whether the new rival knows the signs, whether they hold them correctly, whether they respond correctly when greeted with a blood sign, whether the way they carry themselves matches the affiliation they are claiming or implying. Getting it wrong is not just socially awkward. In a blood-controlled prison unit, getting it wrong is information. It tells the people around you something specific about who you are and what your presence means. And that information in that environment has immediate practical consequences. The wrong response to a blood sign in a blood-controlled space is interpreted as one of two things. Either you are lying about your affiliation, which means you are a fraud and frauds get dealt with, or you are disrespecting their signs, which means you are making a statement about their status and statements about their status get responded to. Wrong response equals wrong answer equals wrong move. In that sequence, the last step is never paperwork. MS-13, the devil's horns out of everything in this video. This is the section that should concern you most, not because MS-13 is the largest gang in America, not because their territory is the most widespread, but because of the specific and documented way that MS-13 responds to the casual use of their signs. By people with no affiliation, MS-13's primary sign, the devil's horns formed with the index and pinky fingers extended while the middle and ring fingers are held down by the thumb, is one of the most internationally recognized gang symbols in the world. It appears in TikTok videos, in Instagram photos, in fashion editorials, in concert footage, in places that have absolutely no connection to El Salvador or to the streets of Los Angeles, where MS-13 developed its American presence. And that visibility is exactly the problem, because MS-13 does not have a casual relationship with its symbols. In El Salvador, where MS-13 originated and where its clique structure is most dense and most active, local police reports have documented cases of non-affiliated individuals who were photographed throwing MS-13 signs on social media and who were subsequently identified and contacted by the local clique, not confronted in the street, specifically identified, tracked down, and asked to explain themselves in a context where the explanation needed to be satisfactory. To people for whom the signs are not internet content, they are identity. In the 2019 Department of Justice report on MS-13 activity in the United States, federal agents specifically noted that social media monitoring of gang sign usage had become an active recruitment and enforcement tool for MS-13 cliques operating in American cities. They are watching social media. They are identifying people who use their signs. and they are making decisions about those people based on a framework in which there are exactly two categories. You are either claiming membership, or you are disrespecting the organization. There is no third category. There is no "I was just doing it for a photo." In MS-13 culture, what you put on your hands communicates who you are, and who you say you are has consequences. Latin Kings. The Latin Kings are one of the oldest and most formally structured street gangs in the United States. Founded in Chicago in the late 1940s as a social organization for Puerto Rican immigrants navigating a hostile urban environment, the Latin Kings have evolved over 70 years into a national organization with an internal structure that includes formal ranks, written bylaws, initiation rituals, and a code of conduct that is more detailed and more deliberately maintained than most people would expect from a street gang. Their primary sign, 5 fingers raised to form the shape of a crown, is their most sacred external symbol. 5 points, 5 letters spelling Almighty, the beginning of Almighty Latin King Nation, the full formal name of the organization. Every element of that sign carries meaning that exists within an organizational context that the person throwing it is claiming to understand and to be authorized to represent. Here is the specific danger of throwing the crown casually. The Latin Kings have an elaborate internal hierarchy that determines who can display the crown and in what context. Not every member displays the sign the same way. Not every setting calls for the sign to be thrown. The organization has specific protocols around when and how its symbols are used. When someone with no affiliation throws the crown in Latin King territory, the organization's response is based on one of 2 interpretations. Either the person is claiming membership they do not have, which is a direct misrepresentation of affiliation that the organization treats as a serious provocation, or the person is throwing the sign as a deliberate act of disrespect, mocking something that the people in that territory have bled for. In both cases, the response is the same. In Chicago, New York, and Hartford, cities where Latin King presence is among the most heavily documented in the country, law enforcement assault reports consistently list crown sign flashing by non-members near Latin King territory as a contributing factor, not an occasional anomaly, a regular, documented pattern. The innocent mistake. Real cases. Everything we have covered in this video so far has been about people who knew what they were doing, or at least knew enough to know they were throwing a gang sign. But the cases that law enforcement and gang researchers describe as the most instructive are the ones involving people who had no idea. People who made a gesture for a photograph that they had seen somewhere and liked the look of. People who threw what they thought was a universal symbol, a peace sign, a rock on, a simple handshake, that happened to match a local gang variation closely enough that the wrong people read it as a declaration. In 2004 in Chicago, a 16-year-old photographed himself throwing what he believed was a standard rock-on gesture, the extended index and pinky with the thumb out, a shape associated with music and concerts and enthusiasm in the mainstream culture he was part of. In the neighborhood where that photograph was seen, the same hand shape matched the sign of an opposing set. He was confronted within 48 hours of the photograph being shared. In 2013 in Houston, a college student at a party threw what he intended as a peace sign for a group photo. The angle of his fingers, to raised with the thumb extended to the side, matched a regional crip variation specific to the zip code where the party was held. The photograph was uploaded to social media. People who knew what they were looking at saw it. He did not know. The people who responded to the photograph did not care that he did not know, because in gang culture, ignorance is not a defense. The sign says what the sign says regardless of what the person throwing it intended. These are not rare edge cases that researchers have to dig to find. Gang intelligence officers who specialize in exactly this area consistently report that social media has created a new era of accidental gang sign incidents on a scale that would have been impossible before photographs could travel from a specific neighborhood to a global audience in seconds. A gesture that once would have been seen only by the people physically present in a specific location can now be seen by anyone who follows the person who posted it. including people who know exactly what that gesture means in that neighborhood. 5 signs. 50 years of history behind each one. A language built in the streets of American cities by people who needed to communicate without being heard by the people trying to stop them, and then broadcast to the entire world by a culture that saw the surface and missed the depth. These signs are not fashion. They are not art. They are not something to throw at a concert or in a photo because they look interesting or because someone you admire used them on a screen. They are declarations made in a language that has consequences built into it. Consequences that do not check whether the person making the declaration understood what they were saying. The sign says what the sign says, and the people who read it will respond to what it says, not to what you meant. Subscribe to Dark Ranks because next time we go deeper into the codes, the signs, and the unwritten rules of the most dangerous organizations in the world. Every sign has her, meaning every meaning has a price. Stay dark.